One-foot-flipper.
All right, it's Wednesday, so I'm sitting here waiting for Juliet or Harry Potter Jedi Ninja Academy as normal. You know, so it gives me a little bit of time to record something. And at the moment, what I'm thinking about is one thing a lot of resellers could do to increase their profits or to salvage some items is to learn the most basic of electronics repair. Not even electronics, just so much as electrical repair. Just learning how to see if that item's not turning on because it's the most simple thing in the world. And the reason why I'm thinking about this is because I had this Pepsi mini fridge up on eBay, and I stuck it up at higher than I wanted to sell it for, higher than I thought it would sell it for, because the power switch on it was a little wibbly. You had to try it 5 or 6 times to get it to click, to actually catch and go on. And I knew I wanted to fix that, so I stuck the item up higher than I expected it to ever sell for, to give me some time to get around to doing that. Of course, instead a month went by, I didn't do anything to it, and it sold at $250. Luckily, tomorrow is a holiday. I think I don't actually have to ship that thing till Monday. I'll have to find a box for it anyway. It's massive. So that is going to give me time to do that. And basically, I got 2 options there. I can just eliminate the switch from this. Actually, 3 options. I can replace the switch with another switch. I'm probably not going to do that because I would have to find, just because I don't have a huge number of switches just sitting around, at least not power switches rated to whatever power that might need. So, and that can look wrong, or, you know, could give me the opportunity that, whoa, what if I slipped up somehow there and used the non-grounded switch and hurt somebody? It isn't very likely. I've been doing electrical work for a very long time. But my other 2 options are, I can just take the switch out of the circuit whatsoever, just open the thing up, remove the 2 wires that go to the switch, and solder or electrical tape them together. Oh good. I'm glad the mowing person waited until I started making a video to come mow this area. How did he know? Who told him? Who told that man that I was going to make a video and now would be the time to mow? So my 2 basic options for this is I can simply open her up, take the 2 wires that go to the switch. Most switches will have 2 wires to them. Sometimes you'll have 4 or more. That can get more complicated if you don't know what you're doing there, leave it alone. But normally when it has 4 or more, it's because it's just separately turning on more than one thing at the same time. But I can take those 2 wires and solder them together, and then cover that with electrical tape or wire nut, or electrical tape them together, and once again, cover it up. If I do that, it plugs it in. It's just on whenever it's plugged in. Or I could also open it up and simply bridge the 2 poles coming off the switch in the back. I can just bridge that with solder. Just solder them together, and that leaves everything in place. And regardless of what position that switch is in, the unit will be on. Depending on how close together I'm probably actually just going to solder bridge them if the poles are very close together, because that's easier and it's much less likely to break. But just learning how basic power, not just things that plug into the wall too. Things with batteries, a lot of times you get something with batteries and they won't turn on. Why won't it turn on? A lot of times it's simply problems with the battery box. You could have rust in the battery box. You can have springs that have compressed too much and now they're not actually making contact with all the batteries. I fixed countless items by taking the battery box apart, cleaning any rust off, pulling the springs back out a little bit, and voila, you've suddenly got a functioning item again with very little work. Now, you might not want to do that with like the cheapest items in the world. You might not want to tear apart $5 items to try to fix them, although those can be good practice items. You know, if you don't want to mess up a real item, you can tear apart that $5 radio that won't turn on and see why it won't turn on. Okay, you can go to your next level and learn how to replace electrolytic capacitors. A lot of your 80s and older electronics will have failed, actually 90s and older really, will have failed because of electrolytic capacitors. These are usually the little blue things that kind of look like tiny batteries. Those things can fail whether they're used or not, and a lot of times, sometimes they'll fail in an obvious way. They'll bulge up or even start leaking, and other times they will fail completely silently. But if you've got an item of value and you open that item up and you realize, say, hey, there's only 4 capacitors in this, and you can just try replacing all 4 capacitors, the item just might start working again. Like, that's the case with, like, most any old TV set that will power on but doesn't work right. If you replace those capacitors, most of the time in that TV set, most of the time it'll go right back to working right. That'll also sometimes fix the ones that won't power up. Sometimes. Although a lot of times the ones that won't power up have a bad flyback transformer or a horizontal output transistor, or HOT as they call them. And that's a little more advanced. I'm not suggesting you start repairing CRT monitors. They aren't valuable enough yet for you to be doing that as far as resale is concerned. Although the time will come, because they're not making any more CRT TVs. No places. I think there is a tube refurbishment facility that can refurb tubes by hand. I think it's in Nebraska. But other than that, there's nothing. There's not going to be new ones ever. You can make a sort of new one. They still do make universal, they make kind of low quality but universal sets of electronics that you can put onto an old tube and sort of get a new monitor or a new TV. But those are really low quality, and most people prefer instead to just repair the original electronics because they tend to last a lot longer when repaired. Your basic CRTV television set or monitor is one of the most long-lasting and mature technologies in existence that we have. That tech goes back to, I believe, the 1930s, and like the meantime, those things just last incredibly. And what you also don't realize is, like back in the old days, when you went to Walmart and you bought the cheap TV set, you know that picture tube in the cheap TV set wasn't new? That picture tube in the cheap TV set was what's called a refurb. That tube already had an entire 10 to 20 year life in another set before it went to that set. And by refurb, what do? They hook up to a machine. If it tests fine within specs, would go right into the new set. Otherwise, they'd blast it. They would blast it with some specific electron patterns and things and try to bring it back into spec, and then they'd stick it back into the set. It's amazing how long CRT specifically monitors can last. The tubes particularly way outlasted the electronics that drove them. All right, where was I now? Oh yeah, 3rd of July. Tomorrow's the 4th. Holidays are always a hit or miss for sales. Maybe you'll sell some stuff, maybe you won't. I don't know, my sales they had gone back to an all-time low again, all-time 30-day low, until that Pepsi fridge sold about an hour ago, and that jacked me back up out of that zone. All right, let's do a few sales here. I sold a booster box of Pokemon cards, Sword and Shield, Chilling Reign, $209. I actually did do free shipping on this, but only because I knew it would sell within 2 days, so I wouldn't have to worry about it, and it did. Sold within 2 days. When you've got a commodity like this that sells often, all you need to do to make it sell first is to have the best price. That's it. Sold some dollhouse pieces for $10. Got the bathtub, the sink, and the toilet. That was a Goodwill Outlets find, and it was in the glass section, so it literally cost pennies. Sold this autographed puck signed by Mark Reeds and Jeremy Rebeck. It's a River Otters puck from 2001. Sold for $8.09. I sold this and couldn't find it like 3 years ago, but eventually I found it again and relisted it, and eventually it sold. Put a photo up on the screen since I don't want to open it. In here, in this little magic box, there is most of a Blood Bowl metal Goblin Army. Sold for $121.90. This next one is why it's good to bring friends with you sourcing, because friends will find completely different things that you won't find. Like my friend John Ceramic found this Withings blood pressure monitor, Wi-Fi blood pressure, Bluetooth connection thing in the Goodwill bins. had less than $1 in this and sold for $53. Not bad. So what are some simple skills you think that resellers could learn to help increase their profits? Specifically, I'm thinking everything sellers. You know, because some things you got to be deep into things to be worth, you know, to having it be worthwhile. I don't think it's worth learning VCR repair unless you're going to buy every VCR you come across. And in that case, it is. Because I can tell you what, VCRs, they're just going to continue to raise in value and they're not going to make any new ones. Not going to happen. The cost would be prohibitively expensive for a new one because the production lines don't exist. Some of the parts aren't in production anymore, or either aren't in production anymore or aren't available in bulk anymore, whatever you want to call it. A new VCR would cost $1,000. Nobody's going to pay that. So that means those old sets are going to continue to need to be repaired. And the main failure with a lot of VCRs is simply they've got belts inside them, and the belts will just fail from age. Same thing with cassette players. Belt failure is huge on old units, and a lot of times that'll be the only thing wrong with the unit in the first place, is that a belt just rotted away, or you know, it got too stretchy over time, or too dry, too brittle, and now the unit doesn't work anymore. VCRs can also suffer from things like, you know, the heads can be dirty. They might actually still make head cleaners. If they don't, they're still fairly available, new old stock. So those you can get. They can suffer from capacitor failure like any old electronics. And sometimes you just get issues which can be harder to deal with the tape feed mechanism, especially the more complicated ones that want to, remember the old ones where it would come up out of the top and then out? Those are the ones most likely to have feed issues. Too bad they never made a VCR that worked, at least that I'm aware of, that worked like cassette players, like most cassette players do, where you just simply put it into a cradle and press it in, and there's no electronic handling, or you know, there's no handling of the tape other than just playing it and reading it. VCRs would be a lot more reliable if they had gone with technology that way. I think the reason that they just didn't is because VCRs in the early days were so expensive to manufacture, and that manual, you know, the automatic tape part of it was such a cheap bit of it that it seemed silly to leave it off. Does that make any sense? You know, if that VCR is going to cost $400 and it's only costing the company $8 to have that automatic, you know, to have those motors that pull the tape in and bring it down rather than having the user position the tape, I can understand why that became the standard. Speaking of VCRs, you'll see this before, but I've got a whole VCR video in limbo, VCR and VHS video in limbo right now because my sponsor, Temu, wasn't happy enough with the length of their ad spot that I read in it, even though the ad spot was supposed to be 60 to 90 seconds, and I did 97 seconds. I guess they were overly impressed with the length of the previous ones in which I shot well into the 2-minute mark on each one. I don't know, but now I've got to somehow lengthen that ad spot before they approve that video to come out. That's some of the things you don't see. When you've got a sponsor, your sponsors are have to approve your videos before they come out, and they're going to want to approve the entire video. You can't just send them the section with their ad spot. That's not good enough. They want to approve the entire video, and then they may have a problem with it. Then you've got to redo it or not get your money. On the plus side, I did pick up another sponsor that's more reselling related. It is a sponsor of shipping supplies, so I will be happy to have a sponsor that won't be making people make fun of me as much, since Temu and some of my other sponsors, I don't think there's anything wrong with them, but they're not really reselling related, while shipping supplies is exactly on target. So anybody got any big plans for the 4th of July? I believe I'm going to my in-laws' house, I think, although I might be going to my brother-in-law's house. It's so confusing because my brother-in-law married a woman who has the same name as his mother. So in my cell phone, there's 2 people with the same name. And if I'm not paying enough attention, you know, I can get it wrong. So I'm not actually sure whose house I'm going to tomorrow, whether it's my mother-in-law or my brother-in-law. Going to one of their houses. I actually live in one of those places where it's legal to shoot fireworks, but on the 4th of July, but for some reason they stopped selling bottle rockets, and that was the most fun thing, at least to me. And there's still no other kids in the neighborhood, except, well, there's a couple of boys. There's no other kids in the neighborhood that my daughter is friends with. There's a few mean boys in the neighborhood that are a couple of years older than her, but there just really isn't anybody for her to hang out with at all. At least next week she's got another week of camp. I wish I could buy her a third week of camp this year, but I am not making as much money as I did in previous years, and I do not have enough money for a third week of camp this year. Hopefully I can do better on that next year. Although next year she'll be 12 going on 13, and maybe she won't want to go to camp. Who knows? She hasn't exactly completely transformed into a teenager yet. She'll be 12 in a couple of weeks, but, you know, it happens. The part where she suddenly got much taller, that part already happened. I think Fat Grandma Fines was commenting on that in the last video when Julie showed up for a second. Yeah, that part already happened. Now, the part where, you know, doesn't like anything and hates her family, that part hasn't happened yet. Not that I'm looking forward to that. And in other fun things and money things, I got it. My Jeep needs to be, which feels like I got this Jeep a month ago, but apparently it's already been a year and it's due for inspection in August. And I know I've got a check engine light on, and I need an alignment and 2 front tires, because the alignment ruined the 2 front tires. Last time I recorded here, a homeless man came over here and tried to sell me drugs, but he does not appear to be here today. Also, marijuana's been legal in Missouri for like quite some time, so I would have thought the whole selling pot to people on the street thing would be over with by now. I don't know. I've never done that sort of thing, so I don't really know exactly how all that culture works, but I assume the black market would just start to disintegrate once a legal market came into place. On the plus side, my latest video about Beanie Babies did not get pulled. My previous video on Beanie Babies got pulled for supporting very bad things for some reason. The algorithm, the robots who watched the video, apparently decided I used too many different keywords and decided that that video was just the worst thing in the entire world. And of course the review was also done by a robot, because the review was completed in 3 seconds. I'm gonna cut that out too. So now that the price increases in the post office went through, did any of you even notice anything? I haven't noticed any differences yet in my under 1 pound rates. Otherwise I don't care, because everything over 1 pound is calculated. My under 1 pounds are a flat rate, and I haven't noticed that my prices are any different. Are yours any different? Speaking of shipping, let's talk about shipping options for a minute, and let me explain why you shouldn't offer any shipping options for customers whatsoever. You know, you notice some sellers will have a drop down. You can pick first class, you can pick priority, you can pick UPS. You do not want to do this. What you're doing when you offer your customer shipping options is you are tying your own hands. You're now forcing yourself to use certain shipping service. It's different if you just put standard shipping, or if you put ground shipping and upgrade it, that's fine. But if you put a drop-down list of specific services, you have tied yourself into that. Now, if they pick UPS, you got to go to UPS tomorrow, even if you had nothing else going to UPS. You know, they don't pay any attention, and they pick and you also get, most of the time, the customers are either going to pick the cheapest option, the ones who look, or they are going to pick whatever comes up by default and not look at the other options. Do you know that you could wreck your account by offering multiple shipping options to your customers? I was looking at one person's account who had some issues, and I noticed that they had both priority mail available and a cheaper service for everything that they sold. But this person, they had priority and a cheaper option available for everything. But I don't know I think it's because they have priority listed first, or as the default, when you search for their item, say like they've got a book, their book is $8. Then it's going to show $8 plus $8.35 shipping in the search, because it's going to that priority rather than their $4.13 shipping for media mail. So that's burying them in search. It's causing people not to click on them, all because they've got a worthless option on there that almost no sane person or person who's paying any attention is going to pick. In fact, I used to offer a couple of shipping options on my cards. I would offer, standard envelope shipping, first class package shipping, or priority mail shipping. And I would say 499 out of 500 customers would select the envelope shipping for under $1. Then I started asking the customers who selected something else if they did it on purpose, or why they selected faster shipping. And every single time I ended up finding out from the customer that they selected that faster or more expensive shipping on accident. None of them were meaning to buy up on their shipping. And after about a month of checking on that, maybe 2 months, it took a while to gather some data. I think I was selling 1,000 plus cards a month, but it still took a while. So, once about the fourth time I heard that, I was like, oh, nobody wants those options. And those options are just costing me money in final value fees. Or, God forsake, a return. No, forget that. I took those off, never looked back. Since then, never had a single customer asked to upgrade their shipping on that account. Never happened. In fact, you should run screaming for most any customer who wants you to upgrade, wants you to ship something faster than normal, because they either need it yesterday and you're not going to get it there on time. They're not going to take your handling time into account. The item's not going to get there before they needed it. And then they're going to file a return and get their excessive amount of shipping money back that they paid for that express shipping for that item. And you're out a whole bunch of money. Or maybe it's none of those, and what it really is a stolen credit card, and the person wants the item just to get there as much as possible, quick as possible, because it's not their money. In that case, same thing. You'll see the chargeback months later, weeks or months later, and you're going to lose that chargeback because it was a stolen card. Because somebody's going to lose in that situation. It's usually not the bank. It's usually going to be the vendor who's going to lose, even though the vendor didn't do anything wrong. All right. I think that's all I've got for today. If you happen to know why bottle rockets aren't sold in St. Charles anymore, why don't you post that down in the comments? I'd love to hear why. And I finally ran out of them myself. Way before I got married, I remember I bought a bunch of bottle rockets with a young lady friend of mine at a truck stop. No big deal. But I bought them like I was a kid, but I was a grown-up, so it took 15 years to finally get through all of them. But now they're gone, and now I don't have any more. And now this video is over.